Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. So many of you have asked for the full story, the one that the talk shows and magazines only got a piece of. It's a strange thing becoming a story in your old age. You spend 65 years as a person, and then one day you wake up and you're a headline. But before the television studios and the shouting matches, it was all much quieter. It started as so many family tragedies do with Thanksgiving. For 30 years, my Thanksgiving was the stuff of legend. Not my legend, mind you. It was the family's. The buttery, flaking crust on my apple pie, a recipe my own grandmother wrote on a flour-stained index card. The savory depth of the gravy I'd start 3 days in advance, simmering the turkey neck and giblets until the whole house smelled of warmth and welcome. My son David used to say my mashed potatoes were the cure for any sadness. It was more than food, it was a ritual. It was the one day of the year the entire sprawling, messy, wonderful Peterson clan came together under my roof, and I was the anchor. I was Marilyn, the matriarch, the keeper of the flame. Then came Heather, my daughter-in-law. When David first brought her home, I saw what he saw. She was bright, ambitious, and she had this energy that seemed to light up a room. She was also a recent graduate of a prestigious culinary institute and was pouring all that ambition into a food blog, Cuisine and Chic. In the beginning, I was charmed. I thought how wonderful we can share this, a love for food. But I soon learned that we didn't share a love for food. Heather loved the idea of food. She loved photographing food, deconstructing it, elevating it, and pinning its corpse to her social media wall like a butterfly in a shadow box. I loved feeding people. There is a profound difference. The first few Thanksgivings she tried to contribute. One year it was a persimmon and pomegranate salad with a chia seed vinaigrette that sat untouched next to my classic Caesar. Another year she brought what she called whipped sweet potato foam with a candied pecan dust. My husband Frank, bless his simple heart, poked it with a fork and asked if the potatoes had gone bad. But this year was different. Heather wasn't just a blogger anymore. She was a finalist on Top Chef Holiday Edition, a nationally televised competition that had made her locally famous and in her own mind a culinary demigod. The call came on a Tuesday in early November. The first chill was in the air, and I was just starting to sketch out my Thanksgiving shopping list, a happy little ritual of its own. Heather's voice was syrupy sweet, the kind of sweetness that coats something sour. "Oh, Marilyn, hello, I was just calling about Thanksgiving." I smiled, my pen hovering over 20-pound free-range turkey. "I'm so glad you did, dear. I was just making my list. Will you and David be able to come over Wednesday night to help with some of the prep?" There was a pause, a small sharp intake of air. "Well, that's actually what I'm calling about. We've been thinking, David and I, and we've decided that I'm going to host this year." The pen stopped. My kitchen, which had felt so warm and full of promise a moment before, suddenly felt cavernous and cold. "I'm sorry, I thought I'd misheard." "Yes, it's just, well, with the show and my blog's traffic going through the roof, I need to create some really spectacular holiday content. I need to impress my followers. It's a crucial time for my brand." Her brand. She said it like it was another member of the family, one who was far more important than I was. But what about the family? What about our tradition? She sighed, a sound of practiced patience that set my teeth on edge. "Marilyn, I love you, but your food, it's a bit dated. It's lovely, for what it is, nostalgic. But my followers are expecting something modern, something with flair. I can't exactly post a picture of a plain old roast turkey and Jell-O salad. It's just not my aesthetic." Dated. The word hit me like a physical slap. 30 years of love and labor, of recipes passed down through generations, of feeding the family that was now her own, and it was all dismissed in a single brutal word. Dated. My hands started to shake, just slightly. I looked at my recipe box on the counter, a worn oak box filled with the handwriting of my mother, my aunts. Dated. I thought of David as a little boy, his face smeared with chocolate from my 7-layer cake, telling me I was the best cook in the whole world. I was supposed to just hand it all over, my entire legacy, because it wasn't good for her brand, because my love was not her aesthetic. What did David say about this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Oh, David gets it. He knows how important this is to my career. He's so supportive. Don't worry, Marilyn. You can just come and relax for once. You've earned a break. And she hung up, leaving me standing in the silence of my own kitchen, feeling like a relic in a museum nobody visited anymore. It wasn't just about a meal. She had taken my crown, my purpose, and my heart, all in a 2-minute phone call, and told me it was a favor. The days that followed were some of the worst of my life. A hollow, aching space had opened up in my chest, where the happy anticipation of the holidays used to live. The house was silent. My husband, Frank, tried his best. He'd pat my hand and say things like, "Now, Mare, maybe it'll be nice to have a year off," but he didn't understand. He saw a chore being lifted from my shoulders. He didn't see the amputation of a piece of my soul. This wasn't about the work. It was about the meaning. For 30 years, I had a role, a purpose that was uniquely mine within the family. I was the one who brought everyone together. My cooking wasn't just about flavor, it was the physical manifestation of my love. Each dish was a story, a memory, and Heather had just declared my stories irrelevant. I found myself wandering through my own home like a ghost. I'd pick up my recipe box, the oak cool and smooth under my fingers, and slide it open. The scent of vanilla, cinnamon, and thyme would waft up. I pulled out a card, brittle with age, from my grandmother's Parker House rolls. Her elegant looping cursive detailed the steps. I could see her in her own kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, the warmth from the oven fogging the windows. I could feel the soft, pillowy dough under my own hands, a memory so visceral it made my eyes well up. I taught David how to make these rolls when he was 8. He'd stood on a little stool, his small hands inexpertly kneading the dough, leaving little thumbprints all over it. He was so proud when we pulled them from the oven, golden and perfect. He'd eaten 5 of them, slathered in butter, before anyone else even sat down at the table. Dated. Was that memory dated? Then there was the card for my mother's sausage and apple stuffing. Her handwriting was a practical, no-nonsense script, just like she was. I remembered the first Thanksgiving after she passed away. The silence in the house was deafening. I thought I couldn't possibly do it, couldn't face the holiday without her. But then I found her recipe box, and this card, and making that stuffing felt like a conversation with her. I could almost hear her voice guiding me. "More sage, Marilyn. Don't be shy with the sage." That stuffing wasn't just food, it was a connection to the woman I missed every single day. Was my grief also dated? I thought back to David and Heather's first Thanksgiving with us, about 10 years ago. Heather had arrived with a casserole dish, a triumphant smile on her face. I brought my deconstructed green bean casserole with a mushroom foam and crispy shallot soil. She'd announced. We'd all stared at the bizarre, sterile-looking concoction. It was a layer of pale green puree, topped with a white foam and a sprinkle of what looked like dirt. My brother-in-law, a man who would eat anything, nudged it with his fork and whispered to me, "Did she drop this on the way over?" It sat on the buffet table, a lonely island of culinary pretension in a sea of comfort and tradition. No one took a single bite. At the time, I'd felt a pang of pity for her. Now I saw it for what it was, the opening salvo in a long, quiet war. Over the years, the digs became more frequent, more pointed. She'd help me in the kitchen, suggesting I replace the butter in my pie crust with a healthier coconut oil blend, or that I should try sous viding the turkey breast for a more consistent texture. She spoke a different language, a language of gels, foams, and spheres. My language was one of pinches, dashes, and until it feels right. She saw my methods as archaic, my intuition as ignorance. She was a scientist. I was a folk artist, and in her world science always won. My son David was caught in the crossfire. He'd call me after one of Heather's visits. "Mom, don't take it personally. She's just passionate. Or she really admires you, you know. She just shows it in a funny way." But the one that truly broke my heart was the phone call a week after she'd commandeered the holiday. I'd been crying off and on for days. I finally told him how much it hurt, how dismissed I felt, and he sighed. That same long-suffering sigh I'd heard from his wife. "Mom, just let her have this one, okay? This Top Chef thing is huge for her. It's her whole life right now. Can't you just be happy for her?" And that was it. That was the moment I realized I had truly lost him. He wasn't just placating his wife. He was agreeing with her. My 30 years of tradition, our family's tradition, was less important than a temporary career boost. My feelings were an inconvenience to be managed. That night I sat alone in the dark living room, the faint glow of a street lamp painting a stripe across the floor. The profound, bottomless weight of their indifference settled over me. It felt like an ending. I was obsolete, a dusty heirloom to be stored in the attic. The tears finally came, hot and silent. I was mourning the loss of my son, the loss of my place in my own family. I felt utterly and completely alone. It was the lowest I had ever been. Then, on a Friday afternoon, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to talk to anyone, but it rang and rang, persistent. Finally, I picked it up. "Hello?" A bright, professional voice on the other end. "Hello, am I speaking with Marilyn Peterson?" "Yes, this is she." "Wonderful. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a producer with Top Chef Holiday Edition." My blood ran cold. My first thought was that Heather had put her up to this, some kind of bizarre prank or a condescending offer to have me appear in the background of one of her blog posts. "What is this about?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Please, Mr. Peterson. I know this is out of the blue. We're in the final stages of planning our live finale, which, as you may know, is centered around the perfect Thanksgiving meal. We've been searching for a very special final guest judge." I was confused. "I think you have the wrong number. My daughter-in-law, Heather Peterson, is your finalist." "Oh, we know," Sarah said, and I could hear a smile in her voice. "We're all very impressed with Heather. She's a phenomenal modern chef. But that's precisely why we're calling you. The theme of the finale this year is tradition versus innovation. We have our panel of celebrity chefs, our innovators. What we're missing, what the show desperately needs, is an expert in tradition, someone who represents the heart and soul of American home cooking." I sank down into the armchair by the phone, my mind reeling. "I don't understand." "Mr. Peterson, we did our research. We spoke to culinary historians, food writers, even some of the old guard chefs who trained your daughter-in-law's own instructors. We were looking for the real thing, not a TV personality who bakes cookies at Christmas. We wanted a legend, and your name kept coming up. Your recipes, the ones passed down in your family, are apparently famous in certain circles for being the absolute gold standard of authentic traditional American holiday cuisine. One chef told us, and I quote, Marilyn Peterson's gravy could bring a man to tears. I laughed, a short, sharp, incredulous sound. My gravy, what we'd like, Sarah continued, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone. is for you to be our secret surprise guest judge for the final round. No one would know until the moment you walk onto the set. Not the other judges, not the audience, and certainly not the finalists. It would be the ultimate test. Can these top chefs, with all their technology and training, create a meal that satisfies not just the palate of a critic, but the heart of a true American matriarch? Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts. We'd pay a handsome appearance fee, of course, and put you up in a lovely hotel. All we'd need is your absolute discretion. I looked around my quiet living room at the ghosts of Thanksgivings past. I thought of Heather's smug, dismissive voice on the phone. I thought of my son telling me to just be happy for her. And I thought of that worn oak recipe box filled not with dated instructions, but with the story of my life written in love and butter. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, a deep, tender bruise, but it was no longer a weight pulling me down. It was becoming fuel. I stood up a little straighter. To be honest, up until that very second, it wasn't about revenge. It was about pain. But as I held that phone, listening to this offer, a new thought began to form, sharp and clear. Maybe it was time the student was reminded of what a real lesson felt like. Maybe it was about revenge now. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks, "tell me more about the contract." The first person I called was Carol. Carol has been my best friend for 40 years, my partner in crime, my rock. She was the only one I could trust with a secret of this magnitude. We met at our usual spot, a little cafe with worn floral booths and coffee that was reliably, unironically, just coffee. I laid out the whole story, from Heather's devastating phone call to the producer's shocking offer. Carol listened, her expression shifting from outrage to disbelief, and finally to a slow, wicked grin that spread across her face. "Marilyn Peterson," she said, stirring her coffee with unnecessary vigor. "You are a magnificent scoundrel. You have to do it. You absolutely have to." "But Carol, is it cruel?" I asked, the last vestiges of my people-pleasing nature clinging on. "She's my son's wife. This is the biggest moment of her career." Carol set her spoon down with a clatter. "Cruel? Let's talk about cruel. Cruel is 30 years of love and tradition being called dated so she can get more likes on Instagram. Cruel is your own son telling you to suck it up for the sake of his wife's brand. What you would be doing is not cruel. It is educational. It is a master class in consequences. And frankly, it's the best thing I've ever heard." Her fierce loyalty was like a balm on my wounded spirit. But as we talked, I realized her support wasn't just about me. Carol was dealing with her own slow-motion version of being rendered obsolete. Her son, Mark, and his wife had just announced they'd be spending Christmas with her in-laws in Florida. "It's just easier, Mom," he had told her. "Pam's parents have a pool, and it's less stuffy." "Stuffy," Carol said to me, her eyes flashing. "For 35 years I have hosted Christmas Eve. I make his favorite gingerbread cookies. I wrap every single present like it's a work of art, and now my traditions are stuffy." It's like they reach a certain age and they think everything we are, everything we built for them is an old sweater they can't wait to get rid of. We sat there for a moment in shared, silent understanding. We were the matriarchs of a changing world, a world that seemed to be telling us our time was over. We were the founders of feasts that were being canceled. "Well," Carol said, her grin returning, "at least one of us gets to go down swinging. We have to prepare you. This isn't just about judging a turkey, Marilyn. This is theater. You can't go in there as sweet Marilyn Peterson from down the street. You have to go in there as the Oracle of Thanksgiving, the high priestess of home cooking." And so my secret training began. Carol, a retired high school drama teacher, became my director. We spent afternoons in my living room, turning it into a mock television studio. She'd place a platter with a single piece of toast on the coffee table and command, "Judge the toast, Marilyn. Deconstruct its very essence." At first I felt ridiculous. I'd say things like, "Well, it's a little burnt on this corner." Carol would throw her hands up in exasperation. "No, no, no, use your words, give it weight." The Maillard reaction on the crust promises a symphony of flavor, but the crumb structure is tragically underdeveloped, revealing a profound lack of patience in the toaster. See, we watched hours of cooking competition shows. I studied the judges, the stern technical one, the effusive emotional one, the celebrity chef who made everything about their own brand. I didn't want to be any of them. I wanted to be me, but with armor. We refined my persona. I wouldn't be mean. I would be disappointed. I wouldn't be angry. I would be the calm, unshakable voice of tradition, the one thing money and ambition couldn't buy. "Your power," Carol said, jabbing a finger at me, "is that you are completely, authentically, 100% the real deal. Heather is playing a part. You are the character she's playing." In between my sessions with Carol, I had my secret video calls with Sarah, the producer. She was a sharp, fast-talking woman in her 30s, and she was my guide to the strange world of reality television. She emailed me the contract, a dense 20-page document of legalese. I spent an entire afternoon reading it with a magnifying glass. There was a strict non-disclosure agreement with a penalty that would make my eyes water. There were clauses about my travel, my wardrobe, which they would provide to fit the show's aesthetic, and my payment. I found the section on plausible inaccuracies and debated them with Carol. The contract stipulated a performance bonus if my appearance led to a social media engagement spike of over 500%. It seemed both ludicrously specific and entirely plausible for the metrics-obsessed world Heather lived in. I signed it and emailed it back, feeling a thrill of conspiracy. Sarah explained the logistics. The finale was being broadcast live on Thanksgiving evening. A black town car would pick me up at a discreet location 2 blocks from my house at 4 p.m. sharp. I would be taken to a private entrance at the studio. I would have my own dressing room, and no one, not even the hair and makeup artists, would be told who I was. They were told I was a network executive. "The other judges won't even meet you until you're all walking to the set," Sarah explained. "The host will introduce you, the cameras will be on the finalists' faces, and television magic." The plan was audacious. It was terrifying, and it was giving me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I started cooking again, not for a feast, but for myself. I'd go into the kitchen and pull out one of my old recipe cards. I made my grandmother's rolls, and as I kneaded the dough, I wasn't just feeling the soft texture, I was feeling my own strength returning. I was reclaiming my own kitchen, my own hands. I wasn't just a sad old woman whose daughter-in-law had stolen her holiday. I was a secret weapon. I was Marilyn Peterson, the gold standard, and I was preparing for battle. My resolve hardened with every passing day. This was no longer just about a single meal. It was about defending a lifetime of them. It was about showing my son and his ambitious wife that tradition isn't a weakness to be discarded. It's a foundation, and mine was about to cause a seismic shock. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived with a cold gray sky that perfectly matched my mood. Frank and I were due at David and Heather's at noon. Getting dressed felt like putting on a costume for a play I never wanted to be in. I chose a simple gray sweater set. It felt appropriately funereal. Frank, who was now my co-conspirator, was vibrating with a nervous energy I hadn't seen in him in years. He kept checking his watch and patting his jacket pocket as if to make sure the car keys were still there. He was a quiet man, my Frank, a man who had spent 40 years avoiding confrontation at all costs. But even he had been pushed too far. Heather's casual cruelty had managed to do what nothing else could. It had turned my placid husband into a rebel. "You've got your story straight," he whispered as we pulled into their driveway. "Sudden blinding migraine at 3:30. Need to go home and lie down in a dark room." "I've got it," I said, taking a deep breath. Showtime. Walking into their house was like walking into a magazine. Everything was shades of gray, white, and chrome. It was minimalist and cold, impeccably clean and completely soulless. There were no happy, chaotic piles of coats on a chair, no scent of baking bread in the air. The only aroma was a faint, vaguely chemical smell I later identified as a white tea and ginger diffuser. A large flat-screen TV was already on, silently showing a pre-show loop for the Top Chef finale. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom for Heather's brand. Heather swept toward us, a vision in a severe cream-colored jumpsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a tight architectural bun. She held a smartphone in one hand, her thumb swiping and tapping. She didn't hug me, she air-kissed the space next to my cheeks. "Marilyn Frank, so glad you could make it." Her eyes flickered over my simple sweater. "Oh, that's a comfortable outfit, good for you. You just find a seat and relax. Don't you worry about a thing." The condescension was so thick I could have sliced it and served it as an appetizer. David scurried over, looking harried. He gave me a quick, tense hug. "Hey, Mom, you okay?" he murmured, his eyes darting toward his wife. He looked like a man trapped between two warring nations. I felt a flash of pity for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his words on the phone. This was a prison of his own making. "You made your bed, son. Now you get to lie in it with a food blogger." The other guests were Heather's parents, a stiff, wealthy couple who looked at me with the same polite pity as their daughter, and a few of her blogger friends, who were all busy taking artfully composed photos of the decor with their phones. The appetizers were served. They weren't so much food as they were concepts. There was a single oyster on a bed of black salt, a thimble-sized cup of chilled cucumber soup, and something Heather called a tomato water gelée with basil foam. I watched as Frank cautiously picked up the gelée, which jiggled precariously on a tiny spoon. He looked at it, looked at me, and then put it back down with a quiet sigh of defeat. The whole afternoon was a performance. Heather floated around, phone in hand, narrating her day for her followers, just pulling the heritage bird from its 24-hour brine. "The skin is going to be so incredibly crisp, guys," she'd say to her phone, before turning to me and adding, "We're doing a sous vide and reverse sear method, Marilyn. You probably wouldn't have heard of it. It guarantees a perfectly moist breast." I just smiled serenely. "That sounds very technical, dear." Inside I was a coiled spring. I was observing. I was gathering data. I was the spy deep behind enemy lines, and my quiet compliance was my camouflage. This wasn't a family gathering. It was the preamble to the main event. It was my silent takeover. At precisely 3:30 p.m., as Heather was dramatically plating a side dish of charred Brussels sprout leaves with a balsamic reduction, I put my plan into motion. I pressed my fingertips to my temple and let out a small pained sigh. Frank, on cue, leaned over. "Marilyn, what is it?" "It's this headache," I whispered, wincing for effect. It just came on out of nowhere. A real migraine. I think I need to go home and lie down. The light is just killing me." Heather turned from her sprouts, her face a mask of annoyance barely concealed by concern. "Oh, for goodness sake, Marilyn. On today of all days. Can't you just take an aspirin?" "It's not that kind of headache, dear," I said, my voice weak. "I'm so sorry to be a bother. Frank, would you mind just taking me home? You can come right back." David looked panicked. "Mom, no, stay. The turkey is almost ready. I can't, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I stood up slowly, swaying just a bit for good measure. Heather let out an exasperated huff. Fine, David, stay here. I need you for the gravy. Frank, just get her home. Try to be back before the show starts at 5. Frank and I made our escape. The moment we were in the car and out of sight of their house, he let out a huge breath. My God, he said, I need a drink. I feel like I just broke out of prison. I started to laugh, a real, genuine laugh. You were brilliant, Frank. A natural. He drove not towards our house, but 2 blocks over, to the corner of Elm and Oakwood. And there it was, waiting exactly as promised. A sleek black town car with tinted windows, utterly out of place on our quiet suburban street. It looked like something from a movie. Frank pulled up behind it. This is it then, he said, his voice a mix of awe and terror. This is it, I confirmed. I leaned over and gave him a kiss. Go back there and enjoy the show. Record their faces for me. Don't worry, he said, a grim smile on his face. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I got out of our sensible sedan and slipped into the cool leather interior of the town car. The driver, a large man in a dark suit, didn't say a word, just pulled smoothly away from the curb. As we drove, I watched my familiar neighborhood slide past the tinted windows. I was leaving the world of Marilyn Peterson, quiet suburban grandmother, and entering the world of Marilyn Peterson, secret guest judge. The transition from the tense, sterile atmosphere of Heather's house to the quiet, humming professionalism of the car was intoxicating. The silent takeover was complete. My first move had been made, and the board was now set for the final public checkmate. Back at Heather's house, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation, but not for the reasons anyone suspected. Frank told me all about it later, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of a secret agent recounting a successful mission. He had returned just as Heather was pulling her masterpiece from the oven. The turkey was, by all accounts, visually stunning. It was a perfect, uniform golden brown, something that looked less like food and more like a prop carved from mahogany. Heather presented it to a smattering of polite applause from her friends and a look of genuine hunger from her father. The secret, she announced to the room, and by extension to her phone, is the low-temperature sous vide bath followed by a high-heat reverse sear. It renders the fat perfectly without drying out the breast meat. The old-fashioned method of just sticking it in the oven for hours is so unpredictable. She shot a look at Frank, a little glint of triumph in her eye. Frank just smiled faintly. They carved the bird. The skin was indeed crisp, but Frank said the meat underneath, while technically moist, had a strange, uniform texture, almost like processed lunch meat. It had none of the tender, falling-apart quality of a slow-roasted bird. It was a turkey without a soul. They sat down to eat, the plates looking like minimalist art installations. A single perfect slice of turkey, a quenelle of potato puree, and 3 strategically placed Brussels sprout leaves. It was a meal designed to be photographed, not devoured. At 4:45, Heather clapped her hands. All right, everyone, time to move to the family room. The finale is about to start. There was a flurry of activity as everyone abandoned their half-eaten, aesthetically pleasing meals and gathered in front of the giant television. The screen was filled with dramatic, fiery graphics and the pulsing music of the Top Chef Holiday Edition theme. Heather was practically giddy, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Her parents looked proud and smug. David just looked nauseous. This is it. Heather squealed as the host, a handsome man with impossibly white teeth, walked onto the stage. My big moment. The host welcomed the audience and introduced the 2 finalists, Heather and a very serious-looking young man from Chicago. They were standing in gleaming, state-of-the-art kitchens, their faces tight with nerves. Then the host introduced the panel of judges. There was a world-famous restaurateur with a severe haircut, a bubbly food blogger with pink hair, and a Michelin-starred French chef who looked perpetually bored. And tonight, the host boomed, his voice echoing in Heather's living room. For our Thanksgiving finale, we have a very special guest, a surprise fourth judge. Heather leaned forward, her eyes glued to the screen. "Ooh, I wonder who it is," she whispered. "Maybe it's Chef Antoine Dubois." The camera on the TV panned to a shadowy figure walking onto the stage. The studio audience applauded politely. The figure stepped into the light. "It was me." Frank said. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so total, so profound, that he could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Every single person had frozen, their eyes wide, locked on the screen. He looked at Heather. Her jaw had dropped. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking pale and sick under her carefully applied makeup. Her mother gasped and put a hand to her chest. Her father just stared, his mouth a perfect O of disbelief. And then David, my poor, conflicted David. He looked from the television screen to his father, then back to the screen. His face was a kaleidoscope of confusion, shock, and a dawning, horrified understanding. On the television, I was smiling calmly, taking my seat at the center of the judges' table. The host's voice continued, a voiceover playing over the shot of my serene face. We wanted to test our finalists on the true meaning of Thanksgiving, so we sought out an icon of American home cooking, a woman whose traditional recipes have been the gold standard for generations. Please give a warm welcome to culinary legend, Marilyn Peterson. The name hit the room like a shockwave. Heather made a small, strangled noise. Her friends were looking back and forth between the TV and Heather, their faces alight with delicious, scandalous gossip. The power in that room had not just shifted, it had been completely and utterly inverted. Heather, the star of the show, the center of the universe, had been eclipsed. Her perfectly curated, brand-focused Thanksgiving had just been publicly, spectacularly upstaged by the very woman she had dismissed as dated. The family's attention, the community's attention, had made an exodus from her chic, modern world and landed squarely at the feet of the woman in the simple black dress on their television screen. The quiet, overlooked matriarch was now the most powerful person in the room, and she wasn't even there. Frank said he just sat back on the sofa, folded his arms, and smiled. The show was just getting started. On screen, I was the picture of composure. The hot studio lights felt warm on my skin, and the energy from the live audience was like a jolt of electricity. I wasn't nervous. I felt centered. I belonged there. The host turned to me first. "Marilyn, thank you for being here. As our expert on tradition, what are you looking for in a Thanksgiving turkey tonight?" I leaned into the microphone, my voice clear and steady. "I'm looking for a turkey that tastes like a memory," I said. "Technique is wonderful, but the heart of Thanksgiving cooking is generosity. It's about food that makes you want to pull your chair closer to the table, not just admire it from a distance. I'm looking for a dish that feels like home." The other judges nodded thoughtfully. The camera cut to a shot of Heather backstage, watching on a monitor, her face ashen. They judged the other finalist first. The young man from Chicago. He had made a smoked turkey with a cornbread and chorizo stuffing. I was given the first critique. I took a bite, chewed slowly, and gathered my thoughts. "The smokiness is beautiful," I began, "and it's cooked with tremendous skill. The meat is juicy, and the skin is crisp. The stuffing has a wonderful, bold flavor. It's a confident and delicious plate of food. It tells a story of a new tradition being made. Well done." I was fair. I was honest. I established my credibility right then and there. This wasn't a personal vendetta, this was a professional assessment. Then it was Heather's turn. Her platter was brought out and placed before us. It was exactly as Frank had described, a perfect sculptural slice of turkey breast, fanned out next to a dollop of potato puree, so smooth it looked like porcelain. A single glistening cranberry sat on top. It was beautiful. It was sterile. It was everything I wasn't. The other judges went first. The restaurateur praised the technical precision. The pink-haired blogger gushed about how Instagrammable it was. The French chef grunted what sounded like an approval of the texture. Then all eyes turned to me. The camera zoomed in, one on my face, one on Heather's. A perfect split screen of impending doom. I picked up my knife and fork and cut a small piece of the turkey. I took a bite. I let it sit on my tongue for a moment. Then I chewed, my expression unreadable. I took a small taste of the potato puree. I paused. The silence in the studio was electric. I could feel thousands of people holding their breath. I placed my silverware down gently on the plate, making a soft clinking sound that seemed to echo in the quiet. I looked directly into the camera, but my words were only for Heather. A chef's first responsibility, I began, my voice soft but carrying immense weight, is to nourish. We nourish the body, yes, but more importantly, we nourish the spirit. This dish is a staggering accomplishment of technique. The temperature control is perfect. The presentation is flawless. It is, in every technical sense of the word, a masterpiece of modern cooking. I saw a flicker of relief on Heather's face on the monitor. She thought she had won. But I continued, letting the word hang in the air. It is also perfectly, completely, and profoundly hollow. Her smile vanished. This plate speaks of ambition. It speaks of precision. It speaks of a desperate need to impress. But it does not speak of generosity. It does not speak of comfort. And it certainly does not speak of love. There is no story here, beyond the story of a chef wanting to prove how clever she is. The turkey is moist, but it has no character. The potatoes are smooth, but they have no soul. It's a dish made for a photograph, not for a family. I leaned forward slightly, delivering the final devastating blow. You said you wanted to create something modern, but in the obsessive pursuit of what's new, you have forgotten what is timeless. True lasting flavor doesn't come from a sous vide machine. It comes from the heart. And this dish is heartless. It has forgotten that the purpose of a Thanksgiving meal isn't just to be eaten. It's to be shared and remembered and loved. Your dish is an idea. It is not a meal. And so in its desperate attempt to be modern, it has, I'm afraid, become hopelessly dated. I leaned back in my chair. I had used her own word against her, dated, not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. A profound silence fell over the set. The host looked stunned. The other judges were staring at me with a mixture of shock and profound respect. On the monitor, Heather looked like she had been turned to stone. 2 large tears began to trace paths through her perfect makeup. It was over. The charade was over. An hour later, the young man from Chicago was crowned the new top chef. Heather stood beside him, clapping mechanically, her face a frozen mask of humiliation. My vindication was complete, and it had been broadcast live in high definition to the entire nation. The ride home in the town car was quiet. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a strange sense of calm. I didn't feel triumphant, not in a fist-pumping celebratory way. I just felt settled, vindicated, yes, but also a little sad. It had been a spectacular cinematic conclusion, but it was a conclusion that never should have been necessary. All I had ever wanted was a little respect. It was a shame I had to go on national television to get it. When I walked through my own front door, Frank was waiting for me. The house was quiet and warm, and he had a cup of chamomile tea waiting for me on the end table. He didn't say much. He just took my hand, his grip firm and warm, and said, "You were magnificent, Marilyn. Absolutely magnificent." That was all I needed. My phone, which I had turned on in the car, was a frantic buzzing hive of activity. Dozens of texts, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I saw David's name flash on the screen again and again. I ignored it all and switched the phone to silent. I wasn't ready to deal with the fallout. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, a deep and dreamless sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Frank had made a pot and was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the local paper. He pushed it towards me. There was a small article on the front of the lifestyle section. Local food blogger upset in Top Chef finale by surprise judge, her own mother-in-law. I just shook my head and pushed it away. I didn't need to read it. I had lived it. Among the barrage of notifications on my phone, there was one text from David that I did read. It was sent at 2 in the morning. It just said, "Mom, I am so sorry. I get it now. I was wrong. We need to talk." I put the phone down without replying. I knew we would talk. Eventually, there would be a long, difficult conversation. Maybe in time there would be healing. But not today. Today was for me. I went into my kitchen, my sanctuary, and I made myself breakfast. Simple scrambled eggs, a piece of toast with butter, and my own homemade jam. It was humble. It was nourishing. It was real. And now, I'm talking to you. So many of you have reached out, sharing your own stories of feeling overlooked, of your traditions being dismissed as dated. And what I've learned through all of this is that our stories matter. Our traditions matter. They aren't cages that hold us in the past. They are the foundations upon which we build our lives. They are the language of love we pass down through generations. Respect for that foundation isn't something to be demanded. It's something to be earned. And self-respect is something you have to be willing to fight for, even if it means causing a scene. It was never really about the turkey. It was about a lifetime of love and labor being tossed aside for something shallow and fleeting. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. My kitchen is mine again. My legacy is secure, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Next year I will be hosting Thanksgiving at my house. The table will be crowded. The meal will be chaotic and brimming with all the old dated recipes, and the scent of roasting turkey will fill every room. It won't be chic. It won't be minimalist. But it will be full of heart. And if you value love over likes and tradition over trends, you know there will always be a place for you at my table. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I hope you'll subscribe and join our little community here. And please, share your own stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and they remind me that none of us are ever truly alone.